I am joined today by Jeremy Clopton and Heath Alloway, both directors at Upstream Academy, where they help accounting firms find innovative and proven solutions for today's challenges and proactively plan for tomorrow. Jeremy and Heath are both co-hosts of the Upstream Leader podcast. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, John. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, John, great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Before we dive into your experience running the Upstream Leader podcast, I'd love to learn more about your business, Upstream Academy. Can you give an overview of Upstream Academy? Who do you help and how do you help them?
Definitely. So Upstream Academy is a firm designed to help successful accounting firms become even more successful. So we're looking for those firms that recognize the power of professional development and leadership development. And we strive to help them get from where they are to a place that's even greater. So we work with the executives, the partner groups. We help develop future leaders within those firms, and also help with strategy, vision development, really helping them figure out not just how to do accounting, but how do you run the accounting firm.
Mm-hmm. So the business of the accounting firm. So what does it mean to, you use this phrase, be high yield and low maintenance? Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. High yield, low maintenance is something that our founder created, for the firm way back in the beginning. And high yield really means you're not just putting forth a good effort, you're getting good results. You're delivering where you need to deliver. You're getting the things done that need to get done. And a lot of folks focus on the business side of yield, right? They're going to the bottom line or the revenue, what have you. But in our mind, high yield could be developing future leaders, and it's focusing on the people side of things. So it's a whole host of things. Low maintenance is exactly what it sounds like, right? You're not a drain on the system. You're not stressing everybody out because you just think that everybody's got to, cater to your every need, but it's really striving to be a part of the firm, be a part of the team, and not being a drain on that system.
Yeah, John, I guess in a way, the way Jeremy described it is teammateship. How can you also be the best teammate, not me as the best individual, but how can I be the best for the organization and my team?
Yeah, we're in the business of expertise, right? And so there's so much expertise on staff in accounting firms today. And Jeremy, you were talking about transitions, and when leadership transitions happen, a lot of times you risk losing that expertise, and that can have a really big impact on the business. So I like that you highlighted transitions there. So, I think that was a great overview of your business, and you're helping accounting firms in the industry. Why launch a podcast? Like, what was the decision that led to launching the Upstream Leader podcast?
I'll jump into this one. And John, so there's probably a couple different things from my perspective. And when Jeremy and I first talked about this, thinking about a podcast was, even if we can just reach one or two or three people and make a difference in their career journey, we're making an impact that way. And for me, it was kind of that mindset of sharing our stories to help others write theirs. And so being able to, either Jeremy and I, or if we connect with other people around the profession or business owners, not everyone has a great coach or a great mentor or someone that has positively impacted them. So if we could build that platform and share that with others and really make a difference in their journey, that was for me at the heart of it. How can we have that service mentality and help others in their journey?
Yeah, and I'd echo what he said. And also, let's, I guess, dial it back just a little bit. I really like podcasts. So there was that aspect of it too, right? There are a lot of great podcasts out there. And I know that at Upstream, we have not just a lot of great content that we can share, and we make a positive impact on people, but we've got a great network. We've got a great community. There are a lot of folks that we interact with on a regular basis that just have so much more to share, so much more to say than they're going to get to in, maybe a webinar or a conference session, and really bringing some of those stories to life. And that's been one of the things that I've really valued more and more as we've gotten, into all the episodes, is we'll have a topic that we want to talk about with a guest, and some of the stories that you hear and the things that you learn through that, you never had a clue that you were going to get into that side of the conversation or the value. And that's really been super rewarding.
Well, what I love about some of the stories that are uncovered in these podcast interviews is a lot of times they can kind of take you by surprise, right? And in many cases, the best stories are ones that don't really have to do anything with business. It's about like what's going on behind the scenes in the personal lives of these, business professionals, accountants in your situation. And so that's what one thing that's really stood out to me. Have you encountered that as well? Is that those stories behind the accountants?
Definitely. And we've done that. I don't know if it was necessarily fully intentional. We have one question that we lead every episode off with, and that is, how did you become the leader that you are today? And that was more designed to be kind of that intro background, a chance for somebody to introduce themselves. And I know in my experience, so many of those answers have taken us down, a completely different path, to where there have been some episodes that the first 15 minutes have just been, kind of diving into that, somewhat related to the topic that we were planning to discuss, but they became so much more impactful. And for some guests, it's even, talking to them afterward, they've been like, it was actually that question that helped me realize I've got a lot more to say than just the technical stuff that I normally talk about. Like there's a lot of value that I think I could provide, diving into my story. I don't know, Heath, if you've experienced the same.
Jeremy, I think you get to know the person and not the title or the professional. And a lot of times I was just kind of thinking through our discussion today, and unfortunately in a busy world, sometimes we don't make time for those discussions. So although yes, it's a podcast, I find it interesting. You kind of get lost in the conversation, not even realizing that 50 people or 300 or however many people could be listening to that conversation. And Jeremy, it actually just happened to me yesterday during a recording. I bet I spent maybe 3 minutes out of 40. Like, it was just hearing this person's story. I just got wrapped up in it, and it was powerful.
I love the way that you also position your podcast around, it's your passport to improve knowledge, skills, and career potential. I think that's a really great line that, pulling from the intro of your show. And I think that really kind of clarifies, what your show is all about. You're trying to improve the leadership qualities of these accounting firm owners, educating them around the business of accounting. So you launched the show in 2021. Do I have that right?
Yep, March of 21.
Okay. So that was like right at the height of kind of COVID. And I know that had a major impact on podcasts around businesses. And so can you kind of walk me through that experience of, did that factor into the decision to launch a podcast during that time?
I don't know that the pandemic necessarily impacted our decision around that as much as it was more, how else can we reach people? Because we were already doing it, and we still continue to do a lot of education that is virtual. One of our big principles of, professional development is it doesn't all have to be in person for 1 week. Like, it's got to be gradual throughout the year. It's got to meet you where you are. It's got to be accessible. So we do a lot of things that are already in that way. Really, it was a great way to reach other people and connect them to others in the profession. And I know there was probably some hesitancy, right, to launch a podcast when everybody else is launching podcasts. And I forget what the stat is. It's some huge percentage never make it past 10 episodes. And I was actually talking with somebody this morning. Now we're 63 episodes in, and we've probably got, I think, at least another 10 already recorded. So, we've got 80 episodes probably ready to go that we're really excited. And I feel like we're really just scratching the surface. And it's because I really think, John, it's because we approached it through the lens of, we want to use this as an avenue to share with people rather than, hey, everybody else has a podcast, maybe we should too.
Sure. Yeah, totally. And that's well put. I think the stat is like 80% of podcasts don't make it past those first 10 episodes. And then in 2019, there were about 330,000 new podcasts that hit the internet, that hit the airwaves. In 2020, that number was 1 million new podcasts. And then, of course,
wow,
it all kind of faded away from there. to your point that, it does take consistency. Congratulations on 60 episodes published, another 10 in the can. That's amazing. I love that you've got a calendar built out. What I'd love to do, Jeremy and Heath, is I'd like to talk about the way you structured your podcast. You both are co-hosts. Some episodes, Heath, you're leading an interview one-on-one. Jeremy, some episodes you're leading an interview one-on-one. Some episodes you both have a guest on where you're having a conversation. And then some episodes you two are kind of interviewing each other or having a conversation together. I love the co-host model. Maybe Heath, let's start with you. Let's speak to your experience with like co-hosting the podcast. What are some of the benefits that you've experienced from that model?
John, the two biggest that come to mind is two hosts. We get different perspectives, different approaches. The back end part of it is just from a time management. With having two of us, so we kind of, I'll take two, he'll take two, and kind of have that rotation set, so that works nicely as well. And you just, even from each and every year, we have different experiences. We talk to different people, we hear things. So I think it broadens our guests, it broadens our topics. The part about Jeremy and I talking together, which we joked about it multiple times, and some people probably don't believe us, but we know what topic we're going to discuss, but we rarely spend any prep time. So a lot of times we'll just jump on and we'll just run with it and roll with it and have that discussion. And that's a lot of fun to just roll up your sleeves and have that kind of conversation, because honestly, again, back to being busy in a day-to-day, that's one time that Jeremy and I get to step back and just talk about what we're seeing and what we're hearing. And that honestly might not even happen without that platform to have that discussion. So it's been a lot of fun. I really like the back and forth that we have with having two hosts.
Do you find that you're repurposing some of the conversations maybe you're having with clients on the podcast and then kind of like sharing notes a little bit?
100%, John.
Yeah.
I'd say from conversations with clients, actually, maybe even other podcasts, things we're hearing and seeing at conferences. So absolutely, it's a way to kind of sit down and have that discussion of what we're both seeing.
Excellent. And Jeremy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just say that, the one thing that's really nice is when you have a conversation with a client, or you have a conversation with somebody at a conference. And when I say conversation with a client, we have any clients listening, not those that are taken in confidence, but just generic conversations topically. You're sitting there and you're thinking, you know what, everybody could benefit from this. And this would be really valuable if other people that we're working with, if they were a part of this conversation, if they could hear, if they could be the fly on the wall. And one of the nice things about a podcast is it gives you the opportunity to do that. And you can, have that conversation. That was super meaningful. We need to go back and we need to record something about that. Or, hey, I was at the, having this conversation with somebody and they were saying, I just wish I knew. Like, I wish I knew how to overcome this. It's like, well, you know what? We've got a platform. We've got an avenue where we can go do that now. And it's just another great way to be able to bring conversations to folks that they may otherwise not have been a part of. And like Heath said, the fact that we have two totally different perspectives, our styles are, I would say, similar, but they're different. And anybody that's listened to the podcast knows that. We've got two different approaches. We have different networks. We have, different connections. We approach and think about things differently. So it's nice because it brings multiple, I would say, diversity of thought and, diversity in perspectives to the same show, which is a really nice thing to have. So it's not just the same old, although don't get me wrong, I do like some of those shows where it's the same and I like the predictability of it, but there are those times that you're like, you know what, I want it to be a little bit, I don't know what direction they're going to go. I don't exactly know what the flow is going to be, because like Heath said, if the two of us jump on, it's just a conversation. There's no scripted questions. In fact, when I interview guests, I have one question that they know I'm going to ask. Some of them don't even know that I'm going to ask it, and that's how you become the leader you are. Outside of that, we're going to have a conversation, and some of them, that's the first time we've had the conversation, and it's so fun to just see where that goes. Just the natural flow that the conversation takes.
Yeah. John, on that too, just to add to Jeremy's comment there, when we take that format, it's interesting to watch because the conversation's from the heart. It's not scripted, and people are truly sharing their stories and their experiences. And that's like going to have a coffee with someone, and it's not a presentation. It's truly from the heart.
Yeah.
and what's top of mind for them. So that's one of the things I love about the format.
Yeah, and I'm just going to build on that. The fact that, I mean, so much of what we do education-wise does have previously defined content. I mean, that's that's how you do educational webinars, right? You speak at a conference, you do webinars. So often you've got the slides, you've got the content that's been approved, you know exactly what you need to talk about, how you need to talk about it, and the time allotment for it. This is almost, it kind of provides us the freedom to say, you know what, we're going to talk about something, and we have a pretty good idea what that something is. And we know it's going to be somewhere between 25 and 40-ish minutes, although sometimes they go longer than that. And it's nice to have that freedom to be able to just take the conversation where you want it to go and then figure out, all right, do we keep it? Do we cut it down? Do we split it in half and make it 2 episodes? What do we do to bring the best of this conversation to the listeners? And in a way, it's a little bit freeing from how we normally present content, and it works for us. And that's something that I think is important to note, right? It works for us. There are plenty of shows I listen to, they have a very defined format, and you know that, and I still enjoy that. That's not a bad thing at all.
So how did you become the leader that you are today? What sort of things do you look for from that answer? What sort of things do you like to dive into?
For me, I like to figure out what in that answer ties back to the topic that we're discussing. So, I had a guest on earlier this week. We were recording, and he is a story expert within the accounting space. And I mean, he went a completely different direction than I thought he would. He was talking about, something somebody told him when he was playing piano in church when he was 11. But it ultimately became the catalyst for what he does. And we were able to then do that. So I really like looking for what's the thread from that answer that pulls through. I had one guest that we were talking about overcoming adversity, and I didn't expect it, but he went all the way back to, some really deep depression that he was in his college days. And that then became kind of the through, right? The pull through, the string that connected that to, I don't know how many, years later, right? We're having this conversation about some other adversity that he experienced from a business standpoint and how he's able to then lean on that to come through. So that's what I'm looking for, okay, what's the connection to how you became the leader that you are, and how is that connected to now what you're known for as an expert? And there's always just some little moment that you can dive into.
I love that approach because it so fits the name of your podcast, the Upstream Leader. You're going upstream in their journey to figure out what that thread is. It just all kind of clicked for me there. Heath, do you take a similar approach to your conversations, or does your approach differ a little bit from Jeremy's?
It's similar but different. On that initial question, it's similar to what Jeremy said, but I try to keep an eye out for any life experiences or something that has that you can just tell means something very important to them. And usually they're very passionate about that. So if there's those kind of experiences, or I'll say aha moments throughout their journey, that usually gives you an insight to something that means a lot to them, and they're very willing to talk about that. Some conversations, John, I probably have a little more structure around depending on who the guest is and how well I know them or don't know them. So if I don't know someone, I'll generally try to at least have a pre-planning call and just kind of have a conversation with them just to get a feel for who they are and, are they comfortable in this environment? And every once in a while, I will send kind of maybe even an outline, or here's a couple sample questions. And then depending on how the conversation goes, I may or may not ever get to those, but it at least gives them an idea. And again, it depends on the guest. I don't do that every time, but if they're newer to the podcast type environment, I'll probably give them a little more guidance. But if not, I'll take the similar approach where just let's roll up our sleeves and have a discussion.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that you have similar approaches, but you come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, and you come at it from a different, you obviously have different personalities in the podcast, so that keeps it fresh, it keeps it new, it keeps it different, keeps it from getting stale, I think is kind of those are the words that I'm looking for. You mentioned that you don't really have a whole lot of prep. It's mostly a conversation around kind of those, I guess, can you walk me through your creative process a little bit. How do you identify the different topics and guests that you want to have on your show? I guess maybe Jeremy, let's start with you.
Creative. I don't know that I've ever been called that. So my creative process, no, I'm joking. So when I'm looking for guests, let's start there. And I was just talking with somebody about this morning, actually. And my approach is I'm looking for somebody that's got a unique story to tell, that's making a difference in the profession, or they're making a difference to their audience, and people are taking note. So sometimes it's, it's something they're known for. Other times it's something that maybe they shared a post on LinkedIn that wasn't meant to be, like this big thing, but you could tell there was a passion to it, right? So I have a guest, her episode will go live in May, and what she's known for, we eventually talked about, which is pricing. But what we started the conversation around was the fact that she received this recognition and shared, a little bit of her backstory. And I said, that is so powerful for people that are in that same spot. Have you ever told it? And she's like, not really. And I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. Yeah, we'll talk about the thing you're known for, because I know you're not going to be on a podcast and not talk about it. But the story of where you started to where you are. And it was interesting. The episode will be with Michelle River. And like I said, it should go live in May. She was talking about, here she's this renowned consultant that everybody knows for pricing and strategic pricing and all these things. She's like, Jeremy, I don't even have a college degree. Like, we got to that it's like she started, she goes, I was a mom at a very, very early age, never even got a college degree. And here I'm everybody's calling her and knows her as the expert in the industry. She's worked in law firms. She's worked in accounting firms. And it was like, yeah, we can talk about pricing. You just need to, that story. Somebody's going to hear that story that's on a leadership journey, and they're going to think, you know what, I can. And when I'm looking for guests, that's typically more what I'm looking for. Yeah, I will occasionally be like, all right, I need somebody on this topic. So I need somebody to talk about AI. But who I go look for is more based on, what do they have that's a unique story to tell, that it's going to I want someone that listens to the podcast, I want them to hear it and think, you know what, I can accomplish more than I thought I could, because, they're in a similar boat to I am, and they did. So I don't want everybody took the same path, the same journey, just because I don't think that's what leadership is. So I typically look to highlight those unique journeys. From a creative process, with the exception of, I think, one person, I've always told them what I wanted to talk about. I had one person, I said, hey, I just want you on the podcast. You tell me what you want to talk about. I just frankly want to talk to you for half an hour, 45 minutes, because you're awesome to talk to. And we kind of came up with that one on the fly. I'll have the topic, I'll share what I want to talk about. Beyond that, my creative process is, hey, let's jump on and talk about it. It's not scripted unless they specifically ask, can I have 3 to 5 prompting questions so that I can feel prepared? Outside of that, my creative process is fairly light, and it's more focused on knowing they've got a story that they can tell.
Excellent.
John, what's crazy about what Jeremy just said is, Jeremy, I don't know if you even recall this, but that guest he was talking about, we both saw the LinkedIn posts, and then when we were planning our schedule, we both had her on our schedule. So it was one of those stories that just kind of caught your eye. It's like, dang, other people need to hear that. So it's kind of funny that's how that worked out.
Okay. I emailed her first. That's how I got the guest.
we had to arm wrestle.
I'd actually emailed her about, I actually already had her on there because she's speaking at one of our conferences this summer. So I was like, all right, we got to have her because she's speaking at the conference. And then we saw that, and it's like, and we need her to talk about this other thing too, because that's way more important than just what she's known for. So
excellent. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I love the focus on storytelling. I love hearing kind of behind the scenes, your creative process, how you select guests, how you work together to select those guests. I think, Heath, that story that you just shared of you both saw that LinkedIn post and you came together, I think that was really kind of telling of how collaborative your process is between the two of you. And I have to believe that because you're co-hosts, we talked about that stat earlier about how 80% of podcasts never make it past 10 episodes. Would it be fair to say that you hold each other accountable in that regard?
Definitely.
I think so, John. Thing is with that stat, and this, maybe I did at the beginning, I just don't remember it, but John, I don't ever remember thinking when we started this that we would fail, or I didn't even like that. I don't know if that ever even crossed my mind with that stat from, I'm not trying to say that to like sound arrogant or anything, but I just don't think when we launched it, the purpose behind it, I don't think with the purpose behind it would allow us to fail in that time frame. I don't know, that thought never crossed my mind, I guess.
Okay.
Now we committed to a year up front, and then committed to collaborating on how we want to approach it. And to your point, we do hold each other accountable, because we're always checking in on, okay, who do you have? Who do I have? Hey, we both heard about this person. Who's the right fit for it? So there is that accountability built in for sure. It's probably it's not policing accountability like most people think of accountability in that regard. It's more so, hey, who are we having? What's our theme? Are there any holes? What type of guests do we need to find? It's more accountability on that side of it. And
it's
then,
fun to have
I'm
a
with
co-host.
Heath.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And I'm with Heath. I don't know that not succeeding was ever even an option, let alone a thought. We signed up for a year and said, hey, we'll figure it out for 24 episodes if we think we should do more. And then about midway through year 2, we decided, hey, let's stop with the season concept and let's just have episodes.
Nice. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I had Katie Tolan on and talking about her Amplify podcast, and that podcast has gone through such an evolution over the years. And she was talking about how the shift to seasons really helped her and her circumstances within the Association for Accounting Marketing. And I think that this just shows that, there's no one size fits all for a podcast, and it's got to be structured in a way that serves your business, obviously, but then it serves your own personal workflows and your own capacity and the bandwidth that you have to dedicate to it. But then I love that you committed up front to a year, and then you decided to say, okay, let's scrap the seasons model. Let's go to an episodic format where you're publishing once every 2 weeks or twice monthly. How are you growing your podcast audience? Like, how are you adding listeners? What strategies, maybe what tactics have been effective for you in growing your listenership so far?
I'd say social media has been a very big benefit for us. LinkedIn is our primary channel there. And that's something we're becoming even more intentional with. So that's been very valuable. We actually recently, we produced the podcast. We've produced it since, I forget which episode, number 20, mid-20s. We've been doing the production in-house. We recently have gone back to having an outside producer who we're very excited to be working with. We've known him a long time and he does great work. So that's going to help us with it as well, and leveraging a little bit of what he does just to make sure that, we're getting some additional reach on social media and various things there. Part of it is also in guest selection. You get guests that already have an audience. That's going to help you build your audience. And I would say that that's had a positive impact as well, is, making sure that we're doing that. And then, when you're on other podcasts, that helps as well. So making sure that we're having conversations. Thank you for allowing us to have this conversation.
Absolutely.
But anytime you're talking with somebody that's got an audience, that's going to help yours as well.
John, it goes back to something Jeremy said earlier around when you hear something someone's going through, and we try to have those kind of conversations that we continue to hear around the profession. And I can't tell you how many times in the last 2 years, at least 2 years, that someone on a call said, we're trying to figure this out, or, we have someone going through this. It's like, guess what? We have a podcast episode. And so, it's sharing those. And then not only that, I've been working closely with some like human resources and learning and development professionals, and they're continuing to look for ways to deliver, educational content and meaningful content. So that's helped expand that reach. So I've just been if someone says something that reminds me of an episode, it's here it comes, and here's a 30-minute listen for you that can help you with what you're going through. And that's been I'd say probably much more targeted. Honestly, I'm not even really doing it, John, to try to grow our listenership. It's more of trying to help them solve a problem or an issue that they're going through.
Absolutely. I love the concept of having that library of content that you can refer to. You're sharing those conversations instead of saying, oh yeah, you know what, I had this one conversation with so and so one time, and trying to kind of recap it. You can just point people to that conversation. I love that about podcasts. And that library of content gives you, a gold mine that you can go back to in the past and not only share it one-to-one, but, take those clips from an episode that you had 6 months ago and reshare it because new listeners didn't hear that, right? And so that way you can kind of keep your social calendars full. And that's exciting that you're hiring a producer to help you out with the show and help you out with some of the marketing. I guess Heath or Jeremy, where do you take your show from here? Are there other, outside of maybe the production and marketing of it, are there other aspects of the show that you're maybe excited to unveil, or are there things down the line that you plan to take the show in one direction or another?
Heath, you want to take a stab? We haven't really talked about this, so this would be one of those off-the-cuff conversations.
Sure.
Well, John, I'll tell you what, and maybe this is not just from a show perspective, but I'll say dream guests. I really, I have 2 or 3 people that are probably way out there from getting them on the show. That's my goal at some point, is to land one of those dream guests and have one of those conversations. And maybe we're making progress towards that. Because it just seems like each and every year we continue to get some people. I just had someone on that, honestly, I've been scared to ask the last couple of years. Maybe scared, hesitant, but he was on, and it was just such an impactful conversation. And I realized that you never know until you ask. And so that's mine. Is I have 2 or 3 people that would be a dream guest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've got my bucket list of guests as well, 2 or 3 on there. The other thing that I'd like, that I have the desire to do, is get some live episodes at some of our events. We host conferences during the year, so I could see some value in doing that and just capturing some more stories and just bringing more of that experience to the podcast, because we've got 5 or 6 different events over the course of a year where I think there'd be a lot of value to it, and I think it would allow us to share some more stories of folks that are up and coming in the profession, and helping them start to see the story that they actually have. The other side of it that we haven't done a lot with yet, that I could see in the future, is the video side of it. Right now we're an audio only podcast, and we've been very intentional with that. So eventually starting to get to where it's video based perhaps, and sharing that probably goes hand in hand with some of the live episodes and live streaming episodes, but I'd say that's a little bit further down the road yet.
I found some success with the video, going video first. It's kind of enabled more content to be generated from the podcast. So yeah, that's absolutely something that I would recommend. I think it's something like only 17% of all podcasts have a video component, something like that. So could be a point of differentiation too. But Jeremy, Heath, this has just been an excellent conversation. I love the whole concept of your podcast. I love the focus on storytelling and finding those stories and pulling those threads. What was upstream in their leadership journey? I think that's fantastic. So folks that are listening to this episode, go check out their show, The Upstream Leader, on wherever you get podcasts. And Jeremy, Heath, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, John. It's been a blast.
Appreciate the conversation.